Hello, guys. It's David Vos again out here in where are we going to call this place? Paradise? Out here in paradise. Yeah. Well, looks like it's going to start warming up here, and we'll have plenty of good weather to get a few things done. I'm unloading now, and I chose this little spot right here by the big ponderosa and the big tree. We'll put a fence, or not a fence. We'll put a swing on that branch, not that one. We showed you the other day, not that branch. There's another branch on the other side. And I had made a campfire down there last night and roasted, what do you call it? Some chicken. And it fell in the sand and into the fire because I haven't got it all situated. I just had it on a stick like a smorgasbord, and it burnt the stick and it fell. I walked away for a second and it fell in the fire. And I picked it up out of the fire and it had some sand and ashes in it. And I'll be darned if that wasn't the best. You know how they're always saying you shouldn't eat anything burned because it's carcinogenic? I've heard that a lot. So they say that if you're barbecuing, it's not good for you. Well, some of you are going to not like this statement because I don't know if all of you have been watching my videos, but a couple of you videos back I said that I've been a vegetarian for, 15 years, or I don't know how long, because actually it's been many years that I've been off and on doing things and fasting, and I think it was almost 20 years ago that I started off. I did a 40-day fast, and after that I ate nothing but vegetables for a long time, and then I went back to, I think I ate some meat for a little while and stuff, but I started an actual vegetarianism probably 15 years or something ago, and then went to fruitarian and to, see, that's what got me real sick, is you can't eat all the sugar and carbs. I did not know that. No one ever taught me that. And I never thought about it, didn't realize. I always knew sugar was bad, and I always knew that you shouldn't eat roots and plant or leaves. But I thought, well, fruit, But I hadn't thought about it, and I didn't look it up, and the nuts don't have very much salt. What am I saying? They don't have much sugar. Probably don't have much salt either. But they don't have any kind of sugar that would raise your blood sugar. They're mostly an oil-based thing. Nuts and the original grains that they used back in the days of Jesus. And they didn't use wheat. The thing we call wheat today is a modern hybridization, and it's got gluten and it's got a lot of sugar, carbs. And they just didn't have the original grains. They were called einkorn, and I don't know, they had barley, they had some kind of spelt and millet and stuff that they used. They used a lot of beans as well in their breads. There was something like 3-part grain, 2-part beans and lentils in Ezekiel's bread. But that doesn't mean all the bread was made that way. I know the Native Americans used yucca and acorns and nuts, and I know the people in the Appalachians used pecans and the chestnuts and the walnuts and everything. Nuts of all kinds are an oil-based food, and we're not supposed to eat a carb-based food. And the carbs aren't good for you, but if you eat them in moderation, you probably won't ever get sick if you eat a lot of meat. We ate meat for 100,000 years or more, and scientists have proven this, but they're not telling you that. But what I was going to say with all that, so I went back to eating meat, and I was almost dead after I tried everything, and here I was saying, Santos looked bad, and it was the fact that he was a vegetarian. Well, that was because I've been learning this for the last few months, but I didn't actually put it into full practice because I was still debating and looking and searching, and I've come to understand now that a mostly meat and nut grain, real original grain bean diet. And I know a lot of people, doctors say, oh, there's lectins in beans. Not when you cook them. Pressure cook them or just boil them for a long time. And you're not supposed to eat beans raw, but they are, it's same with grains. You can roast them or cook them in some way, but they're made to be cooked. In fact, that's what the Hebrew word is for the staff of life, which in Hebrew is lacham, and cham means burned. So lacham means that which is processed, burned food, cooked food. I mean, the correct translation should be probably cooked food. And so it would be grains and beans and meat. In Arabic, lacham means meat. Originally in Hebrew, the original Hebrew, it meant some sort of meat. But it came down to mean meat and bread and stuff. And today, modern Hebrew, they say it just means bread. But it is a cooked food. But again, they did not, in the Jesus' day, they did not have this thing we call wheat or rice or any of the modern things. They are hybridized and there's sugar in them, they're carbs, and the gluten did not exist in those others. So after having gone through all that, now I'm eating meat. I started to wonder about when I dropped that meat in the sand, and it literally was charred, kind of burned around some of the outside of the edges of the meat. And I went ahead and ate it, and it was so good. And then I thought, well, if the old ancient peoples used to be hunter-gatherers, and they were that way for that's how we evolved. If we stopped doing that, even if you ate good vegetables, if you ate good vegetables and no meat, you might be healthy, because that's an oil-based diet, but you'd still be missing, you wouldn't get maybe enough vitamin Bs, and there's different things that is in meat. There's bacterial things, there's something, or enzymes that's in meat that restores your health. But regular offspring of the plant is good to eat. Okay, I don't know what the percentage is. I think when hunter-gatherers ran out of meat, or it was winter, or there was starvation or anything, they went to eating mostly beans and grains, and sometimes if they were really hungry, they'd eat roots and like yucca plants and different things. But who's going to eat a yucca root when you can eat a buffalo? So that's what they did mostly. The natives up in the Eskimos, all they ate was blubber. They say that, but I'm sure they ate the whole whale, the meat, which is mostly blubber. And by the way, when you eat meat, you need to eat lots of fat, animal fat. You'll dry out, you won't have enough. It's just you need the fat with it. And that's the energy that you burn, is the fat instead of the sugar. But anyway, I saw that fall in the fire, and I ate it, and it was so good, and I was thinking, all right, if these hunter-gatherers we now prove that with science. They can look at the cell and decide what they actually ate, whether they ate mostly vegetables or meat. And they determined that hunter-gatherers ate about 80% meat, muscle meat, from buffalo and things like this. Some places maybe people lived along the sea, they ate mostly fish and whales or whatever, but the ones they studied, in the inland areas, the hunter-gatherers, they ate mostly muscle meat like buffalo and deer and elk and bison and so forth. But I'm sure they ate rabbit and everything else. But when they ate that, how do you suppose they cooked it? Over a fire. And that is carcinogenic according to scientists. And yet, scientists tell us that we should go ahead and eat our vegetables every day. They tell us only eat hydrogenated oils, but don't eat animal fat. It'll make you sick. They tell us don't eat meat. It's not good for you. It causes cancer. And all of these were just not mistakes. They were lies. Because human beings not only cannot change with their evolutionary stage, but it's spiritual. It's a thing. The old covenant was that. Jesus didn't change it. He fed them fish. Almost to say that we're going to start progressing. When we do become immortal, we won't eat meat no more. But as mortal beings, we have this paradox of the fact that we live in a dying and death world, an eye for an eye world, which as Christians, we are no part of it in Christ. There's neither male nor female, slave nor freeman. In Christ, we don't judge one another. We do the best we can. We follow the Holy Spirit, and so therefore, a lot of Christians that reach that place where they're reaching for a higher way of life, they tend to feel bad about killing the animals. But I'll tell you, part of the reason why we do that is because of the New Age movement, which was now the original when it was first started by um, Helena Blavatsky. She is probably the one who started the New Age movement. She was a true prophet. Read her book, Isis Unveiled, um, and the other one I can't think of right now. Something, but they're great. They kind of synchronize all of the ancient teachings, like I'm doing, and I haven't really read her works much, but like I said, I kind of speed read and I kind of know what people were. And the Lord's told me that she's a prophet. But as soon as she got to telling everybody all this amazing truths and stuff, the Illuminati, which were around at that time, they didn't like it. They tried to kill her. They tried to stop the work. She fled to India, and there was a group of gurus and sages over there that protected her. But actually, who protected her was, well, I don't want to get into her, but we've done that. Basically, some angels and by the divine providence. But after she died, they took all of her works, mistranslated it, didn't publish some of the stuff that she said, and only put parts of it out. And then created these teachings that were just fluff, like, oh, rainbows and crystals and dreams, but never telling anybody how to actually progress and have dreams. Yeah, the reincarnation's something that we've learned now, and the karma, and that's all good. But they didn't teach us a lot of good stuff about diet, and they started bringing in these doctrines of devils. Book of Timothy, we mentioned this the other day, about a week ago. One of the doctrines is this thing going around where they're saying we shouldn't have a man and a woman shouldn't be together, like the New Testament says, let every man have his own woman and every woman have her own man. Let us subject ourselves one to another. It's not like it was in Christ. Men aren't supposed to keep their women in bondage and make contracts and covenants. What we do now is we let our yes be yes and our no, no. But we're still in the world. We're living in the world, though we're no part of it, and we have to use it to the best of our ability. And we still have to eat, and we're not immortal. And our bodies, for thousands and thousands of years, have been evolved and conditioned to eat meat. So what the highest religion is the one that Jesus gave us. And he told us something, and I don't think a lot of people understand this. He said, Paul told us, the Apostle Paul told us that if we bless the food, we give thanks before we eat, then we've sanctified it. And even if it was poison, it wouldn't hurt us. Now, that applies only to those who are truly in touch with the Holy Spirit and truly are praying with thanksgiving and with appreciation. It is a holy, we don't have ceremonies today. We don't get saved by being baptized or sprinkled or voila, abracadabra. There's no ceremonies that gets us to heaven. But what we do have is a way of life that Jesus started, and the Apostle Paul says, I tell you what I learned, that in the night in which he was betrayed, he took a loaf. Again, that's not wheat. It's all the vegetables, beans, nuts, and everything that they had at that time, wherever you are, whatever's locally available. And they ground it up and cooked it over a fire, roasted it, and made flat bread or some kind of bread, what we call bread, but it didn't even look not anything like bread we have today. But there was no sugar in it, very little. Whatever little bit of sugar you would have in a bean is low glycemic. It's index. It's healthy. It's the exact way. We need slightly a little bit of sugar to live. Okay, our body can make sugar from the fat, but we do need a little sugar in our food, just the amount, the small amount that's in the beans and nuts, and those are the offspring of the plants. Now, in the summer, there we can eat berries and stuff a little bit because they only grow for about a month in late summer, and we gorge ourselves on pies and berries for about a month to fatten ourselves up for winter. That's kind of something that we did for years. But for 11 months out of the year, well, I'd say probably 7 or 8 months, people ate meat, and they supplemented it with a little bit of beans and nuts, because who wouldn't want some nuts with their meat? I mean, that gets boring, and that gives you a little fiber so that you can. I think a lot of people are just eating only meat with absolutely no other. One of the reasons they do that is because they've become so sick. They've got leaky gut, and they've got celiac disease, and that's a real thing. I had it too, and I didn't even know. I felt like crap every time I was eating all this stuff and carbs and breads and grains. I had no idea. Now, if you say, well, I'm not going to eat the carbs then, what do you got left? I'll just eat beans and nuts? Well, okay, you could do that. But I suggest that you eat some fish with it if you don't want to eat the meat. But anyway, the healthiest diet is meat of some kind. 50% meat, 70%, whatever you like. Make sure you take some nuts, grind them up. Some original grains you can get at a health food store. Or, as I'm going to do, I'm going to pick the acorns. By the way, that's not a fir tree. I stand corrected. There was somebody in my comments, the video I did the day before yesterday, that said that's not a fir tree, it's a pine tree. And I thought she was wrong. And I went and looked, and sure enough, there are 2 needles together and not just one. Because all the pine varieties have either 2 needles, 3 needles, or sometimes 4 or something together in one little thing. But when a fir is just each needle is by itself, a single needles. So that's not a needle. And by the way, it's better than fir, because I don't know what you could do with fir. I don't know much about fir. But what's really neat is that those trees, and there's lots of them around here, are actually pinyon trees. And that's whatever time they're ready to harvest, you put a tarp under it or something, or a blanket, and you shake the tree, and it just, you got all these pine nuts just fall they shake out at a certain time of year. They fall onto the tarp, and then you gather them up, and you've got like several pounds of pine nuts from a couple of trees. And I've got enough pine nuts around here, and acorns, and probably other things that I don't even know about yet. Other, offspring of I think all the trees pretty much have some kind of nut or berry or something. We've got the juniper berries. I don't know what to do with those yet. But anyway, there's plenty to eat here. There's elk. There's rabbit. I met the neighbor, the once building cabin. He's a really neat guy. He's single. He's by himself. He's been out here since August, and something happened. It's a long story, and I won't get into his business, but he ran out of money and stuff, and he doesn't have food, so I said I could help him out. I've got a few things here that he can, and he couldn't get, I don't know, he was saying he couldn't get food stamps and stuff like this because he couldn't get in town for the appointment, and I said, well, I'd help him and take him to town. But he's a nice guy. He ran out of money, so he's not finishing the cabin until he gets more money, but he's just been kind of camping over there. So we'll have a good friend next to me, somebody that I think is a good person, and then there's another person on the mile up the road from me that's a single guy that the other guy told me is a real nice, friendly man, and so they're all good people out here, but we got plenty to eat. Oh, I was going to say about that guy. So when he got hungry, he went out and he does have a gun, and he shot him a rabbit, and he said that was the best meat he ever ate. Of course, it might have been, seemed like it was the best meat since he was so hungry, but yeah, you can live off the land. He'd been living off the land here for, I guess, a few months now, but he, it's been hard for him because he probably doesn't know exactly how to live. When you come out in the middle of nowhere and you don't know, you've lived in civilization, you really don't know how to do it. So that's what we need to learn how to do. And this is the food, the natural foods. The acorns, the natives ate them. They ground them, made breads, they made porridges and things like that. Um, so I still never got to the point. I started off saying when that chicken fell in the sand and in the ashes, I ate it. And I was thinking, man, that's carcinogenic, and they're telling us that's wrong. And then I thought, well, if mankind for hundreds of thousands of years ate their meat, they must have ate it over fire for a large percentage of that time. I know eventually they probably made ovens and stoves and stuff like that out of brick and things, of course. But I imagine they ate a lot of barbecued, one way or the other, barbecued meat, which would be, according to the scientists, carcinogenic. Isn't it interesting that they're all worried about us eating our meat over a fire because it might have something bad for us? And yet they don't tell us that the vegetables and all of these fruits and the fruit juices, a fruit juice like orange juice is just as bad for you as soda. You're just pumping all that sugar right into your body. It'll give you diabetes and kill you soon. Ruin your gut. So they're not telling us about that. But boy, oh boy, they're warning us about that meat. Don't let that meat be barbecued. That's carcinogenic. Well, that's pretty much the only way you can eat the meat is to fry it, cook it, roast it. I don't think we're supposed to eat it raw. I don't think I could stomach that. And I don't even know if that's good for you. Maybe you could get used to it, but I don't think that's the way human beings have ever done. We know in the Old Testament that it's practically the law that you make a altar, which by the way just means a barbecue pit. They stacked rocks up, and they made a sacrifice, which by the way just means a slaughter. They killed the animal. They bled the animal on the ground, and they said a prayer. And that is the prayer of thanksgiving. That is that thankfulness that the natives also did. And they taught their children about the cycle of life. And they said, okay, everything in this world dies. And the animals need to live a short while and then die. They're here for the purpose of feeding higher species, and the other higher species feeds the other higher species until man. This is what it says in the book of the sayings of Jesus in, I think it's Thomas or something. It says that the lion eats the man, or the man eats the lion. And the only way it works out is if the man eats the lion. Because if the lion eats the man, well, it's good for the lion because he becomes a man. He's going to die anyway. He's going to eventually become a man. And that's the way life goes. But a man shouldn't be a little puny, weeny, weak person who won't eat lions, because if the lion comes and eats you, because it's, he's going to try and kill you. You're going to have to protect yourself from the wild animals, and you're going to have to, do the natural process. Eat the lion, or else the lion will eat you. That's what it says. And so this is how the natives would teach their children about the cycle of life, and they would give thanks to Mother Nature, Mother Earth, and Father Heaven. And it wasn't like a ritual, but they didn't eat their food, but they had their children kneel down, and when they took an animal's life, they taught their children what was going on. They taught them about reincarnation. They taught them about the cycle of life. They taught the children about love, how we're going to progress one day and go to the kingdom in the heavens. They taught about that, right? Sometimes it would be the northern kingdom or whatever, but where their ancestors had gone, and they had come from where their ancestors had come, and they were going to go where their ancestors went. And a lot of times it was up on top of a mountain. Now, a lot of people think, oh, something got a hollow earth, or maybe they went into a cave. Well, that's where they came from the depths, from the lower species, from hell. And we're all progressing to the top of the mountain, which is Mount Zion, which is where the kingdom is, where it meets the heavens. And so the children were taught these things, which is what our old covenant it basically is. These Native Americans that lived here in America, they were Hebrews, and that is the original Hebrew religion. And I guarantee, read the Book of Mormon, it tells you about this, but you can actually verify this. California, I've talked about the natives there. The last one they found in Butte, California, Butte County, the county jail. They bring in some linguistics and they try to figure out what language they spoke, and they determined that they spoke the language of Hebrew. They eventually said, "What is your name?" And the guy was like, "What are you talking about?" Went through all different languages. Finally, the Indian said, "Ishi," which in Hebrew means man. And he found out later, after he found out what language it was, then he was able to speak with him, and he found out all kinds of stuff. Like, he wasn't going to say his name because that's not how they do it. He just says, "I am man." And when he heard that, he knew he spoke Hebrew. So they determined later that for sure that the Yaha or the Yahi Indians and the whole all those natives of the entire California all the way down to Southern California, northern Oregon, the whole area, Nevada, they spoke Hebrew. They were all related, those tribes. And as far as the New Mexico area, the Navajo and the Pueblo are is the most ancient that we have today. The Zuni, the Pueblo Indians, and the Navajo. They're the ancient one. They're the most ancient existing tribes. But the tribes that are a little more ancient than that, they call the Anasazi, the ancient peoples. And so, if you look on, I've got a video. I've done videos on. I've talked about it quite a bit. They're right there in Los Lunas area. There's this big kind of a mountain, looks like Mount Zion almost. It's kind of a pyramidal type mountain out in the desert there that I ended up running across and found. At the top of that mountain, there's an altar with the name in paleographic Hebrew. This is real Hebrew, not this fake stuff that they made up. These Talmudic Judeans that retranslated the Bible into this thing they call Hebrew. They made it up. This block letter Hebrew, which is basically Syriac or Aramaic. It wasn't that. It was the original Hebrew that's now a dead language, but no one ever spoke that language after about the time of Christ, about maybe 100 years BC. So by the time Jesus and the apostles were here, the Judeans and the peoples in that area were speaking. They had been speaking Aramaic because that's what the Persian Empire, their national language. But then when the Greeks took over, they all spoke Greek. And then later on, when the Romans took over, they spoke Latin. But in the days of Christ, they spoke Greek. They didn't speak any kind of Hebrew. Some of them may have still remembered or understood, maybe some of the priests and stuff like that. But remember, they were scattered all the world. So they spoke whatever language that the nation they were in. And but the Book of Mormon tells of how Nephi and Lehi and Laman, his two sons, they came over on a boat and they spoke a language that the Book of Mormon says was mostly Hebrew, with kind of looked like Phoenician or something. And sure enough, that mountain's got this big, huge rock at the base, the size of a big motorhome. And on one side, it's flat. It's completely level flat, like somebody broke it right in half or something. And it's up on end, so you can see the face of this round rock. And etched into the face of this big rock is the Ten Commandments written in the paleographic Hebrew. Up on top of the mountain is the altar. And there's some other rocks all over the place from ruins. It was up there at one time, but it's very old. So it's been completely ransacked, and the rocks are all laying all over the place. There's different petroglyphs all over the place. I've discovered what those petroglyphs are. They didn't scribble like children. Those are animal pictures. Those are star charts. Those are astrological animals, and they are calendars, and they are stories of the ages and the things that they went through in different ages. And it'll tell you the date, and they'll have these little animals, and we think it's just their scribbling, but those little animals are basically what we call petroglyph, is basically a calendar showing you what the date was for when they pinned it. So that rock has an astrological calendar etched into the rock nearby, right off to the left of it. You could see the rock where they etched it from the paleographic Hebrew that they also wrote. They knew how to do the actual Hebrew. They didn't just write in petroglyphs. They actually wrote in Hebrew, original paleographic Hebrew. And we know for various reasons that it's real. It's they did, those ancient ones did speak this language, because it's right there on the rock, and off to the side, the date that they give in their little calendar for when they wrote it was 106 BC. So it fits with everything we know about it, and it's important that we understand that we know beyond a doubt that these Native Americans are lost Israel. Now, like I said, every nation on the face of the earth, the tribes in Africa lost Israel. The tribes in the northern tribes up in Sweden and England and Russia, they're tribes too, but those are mostly of the tribe of Dan and Judah and Asher. And the Bible says they would eventually take over the world, and the scepter went with Judah. And the lineal descent that is still in power, that has the scepter, is there with the 10 Germanic tribes, but they're just basically the Danites and the Judahites and some Ashers. They took a remnant of other tribes with them. There's a remnant of just about every tribe of Israel and just about any place in the world. But the northern tribes are mostly Judah and Dan. Africa has their tribes, China, everywhere around the world. But we can prove it here in America. I can, because I'm here and I've seen it. I haven't done too much research about what's going on in Africa yet, but I will do some more research on that, and China and different places. But we know then that California, Nevada, Arizona was all Hebrew. They spoke Hebrew. We know that New Mexico, Hebrew. They spoke Hebrew. Colorado, in the Purgatory Canyon, there is Hebrew letters all over the canyon walls, right next to the petroglyph. And if you go into Tennessee and Alabama, where I was, and Mississippi, and up along the Mississippi River, up by St. Louis, and all the way up to Wisconsin, they have dug up many pyramidal buildings, ancient ruins, the mound builders, all of that. And under the mounds, they've found, literally, they've dug the mounds out, and they have discovered these little sarcophaguses, little small ones, little boxes, that when they opened them, and they had Hebrew writing all over them, and inside, some of them had part of the Ten Commandments written. So we know that all throughout the United States, the ancient Native American people spoke Hebrew, the original paleographic Hebrew. And they taught their children. So this is why I told you all that. The true Native American religion is the religion that mankind had for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. It is the teaching of Abraham. And what they taught was that we would take an altar or some rocks. It was a religious thing, okay? But if you understand what the word religion means, religion's an old word, Latinized word that they've brought into English, that we don't know what it means anymore. We think it means going to church and doing a bunch of rituals. Okay, we do stuff, but they're not ceremonies and rituals. They're a way of life. We are supposed to walk with one foot in front of the other. That's not a ritual. It's just the way we ought to do. We are supposed to drink water every day. That's just what we should do. And we should drink natural spring water. But that's not a ritual. We are supposed to eat. And there is foods that are the healthiest and best for us, in line with the what would you say, the way of life, the natural way that we should live in harmony with nature. The lion kills the rabbit, and the man kills the lion, and that's how it works. And we evolve, and we transmigrate until we become human as we are, and then we are reaching now this point called the harvest. And we're going to be going into a new age, and we're going to receive the kingdom. And in that place, many of us will get our immortal robes. We'll become immortal. We'll be in another paradisical glory. And in that place where we never die, the plants don't die either, and therefore we don't eat them. It's a whole different thing that we don't understand, and I won't even try to give you my opinion on it in this video. But the apostles told us that we do not know what we will be like, meaning we don't know what we're going to eat or anything else, although we know we'll live forever and nothing will ever die. But in this world, we have certain ways of life. And so we give thanks, and we respect the animal. We don't take the life without offering up a prayer. Of thanksgiving and showing respect and honoring the life of that animal. Now, if you don't do it, that doesn't mean that you're going to hell. What it means is that you have not learned respect. You are not living in harmony with the elders and the ancient ones. This is what we call the Lord's Supper. And he says, do this until I come. We're still supposed to do it. Is it a ritual? No, it's food. It's called the love feast. And we're supposed to eat our food with thanksgiving. And we're supposed to share our food with our families and our brothers and sisters. And by the way, our brothers and sisters aren't just, our natural born brothers and sisters, because we're all brothers and sisters. And so all nations are as a brotherhood, and we're a family. We've got to understand that we have to share our food and live in. See, there's another thing. Originally, the word in the New Testament, they had all things common. That's where we get this thing, communism. But that communism came from Karl Marx. That's nothing to do with the Christian living in common. And it didn't mean that they all shared each other's wives. It didn't mean that they all lived in the same, house and were all forced to live under some rules and they all had to be celibate. And that's not at all. Of course, Peter was married. Paul wasn't. He was a widow. Paul told us every man his own woman. There's no commune like the hippie thing. What it is we share the land and the blessings, the resources. Everything is shared, and we live in harmony with it. And one of the things is we have these meals, and we remind ourselves every time we eat that we're immortal and that we're going to advance. And we teach our children about reincarnation and advancement and transmigration, and that how we will one day reach the stars. So we came from the stars and we're going to go back. And this is the way the ancient ones taught their children. And we're not doing that today. So, yeah. That's the way it goes. That's the way the cookie crumbles. And it is hard for some people who have been vegetarian for a long time to understand this. But I'm telling you, if you don't start eating some meat, you will die prematurely. Although it might not matter because Christ is coming back soon. And the Apostle Paul did not say that you're somehow a bad person if you just eat vegetables. He did say that some of them who did eat just vegetables were weak. We don't know for certain if he meant weak in faith or just weak in physical strength and body, but I can tell you that word weak, translated weak, does mean sick or illness or disease. And he did say in another place, some of you are weak and are dying. So I do think he meant physically weak and sick. And if we only have 5 years left, I think we should make sure that we're healthy, have energy. You can't get energy from sugar. It's like a drug. It gives you a high. You get energy for a few minutes, and then later on you're fatigued and you're tired, and you end up with arthritis and all these autoimmune deficiencies and celiac disease. You should stay away from all the carbs. And what do you have left? Beans, nuts, and meat. Jesus gave them fish. John the Baptist ate locusts. We don't know if that's some kind of a bean some think it's a locust bean. Some think it was, I don't know. I don't think it's just some sort of locust bean. Anyway, he wore a camel's robe. That was his official garment. So that camel had to die in order to give up his robe. You see, we're wearing the animal skin. That's called covering in Hebrew. It's the word, we're covered. And the word and the way that started was in the garden, where Yahweh killed an animal and gave them garments to cover them. And in Hebrew, that word is translated many times atonement. So to make atonement for your soul, you take the life of an animal, which is a temporary life, and it's applied to your existence, and you get temporary life. And he advances and you advance. And that's the law. And you cover yourself with the hide. And they also made tents. They sewed them together and made a covering or a tent or a tabernacle. And this was the place that we dwelled in to get protection from the elements. And then the flesh of the animal we ate, and the blood we poured on the ground, and offered up a prayer of thanksgiving on an altar of rocks made with stone, no chiseling. Temples that were etched out and made with all this engravings and chiseled, artwork and stuff was not the original proper way to live. We're not supposed to build those kinds of, like Abraham and those guys, they made monuments. What they did is they found a stone and then stood it up. Or they would stack stones one on top of another, but they didn't chisel the stones. So when Solomon came, he made this magnificent temple with etched stone and gold and lapis lazuli and all this other stuff. But our Heavenly Father didn't appreciate that, and it tells you that in Isaiah 66 and the last few chapters of Isaiah and Amos and Hosea, and of course the New Testament, that says that the Heavenly Father doesn't dwell in, a building made with hands. And that's why we should put the stones not made with hands or chiseled. The original religion, which is just a spiritual way of life, is to eat, breathe, sleep, and live, and to teach our children the cycle of life. And we did it by taking some stones and making a barbecue pit. So I suppose they probably ate some carcinogenic, burned, that's what we're supposed to eat. Burned, we've been taught so many lies. Oh, cooked food's bad for you. Well, then why is it that it's called, cooked food is called the staff of life, the bread of life? And Jesus said, man doth not live by bread alone, but by every word that cometh out of the mouth of the Lord. Well, that means that spiritually we live off the words and the truth. But physically, our body lives off bread. And that bread was made out of the beans and the nuts. And they ate that bread with their other lachem, which the ancient language, used for meat as well. And so Jesus gave them fish and bread. And that was the Lord's Supper. And we are to do that until he comes. So I'm going to get up here for a second and just walk over here for a minute. I don't know how much more battery we've even got on this thing. It's a little different out here. I haven't figured out what I'm going to do yet, because the only way I've got to change or charge my phone now is to plug it into the truck, and that means you got to start the truck every so often, use a lot of gas and stuff. So I'm going to buy a solar panel and fix all that up, and we're going to work on getting a little cabin going here and different things. Now, even out here, once in a while, we got airplanes going over, huh? But where I've decided to put my camper is a place where I get lots of sunshine, but it's still protected from a lot of the wind. And I'm right here by my little place where I can come up here in the morning and drink my coffee from the top of that rock or something. And I'll have this little oak trees here. Yeah, I see the acorns right here. Pieces of the top part of the egg. So we'll have pine nuts and acorns for sure. And I'm going to gather them when they're ripe this year for sure, and I'll bag them up and learn how to use them and eat them. So beautiful here. But that's the way I'm going to be doing it from now on. And, I don't know how I'm going to be able to you know, I want to start hunting, but of course in the United States you have to have license and all this stuff, and if you go get a gun or something like that, you'd have to, which I have never really owned a gun. I did own a gun years and years ago when I was about 17. Went into a hardware store and bought a pistol, and I never did really use that gun at all. But it went and lost it somewhere. I don't know where. Somebody took it or stole it from me. But I have never had a gun since, and I have used them. Like I said, my dad was a big hunter, and he took me hunting when I was about 15, and I shot a deer. That was the only deer I ever shot, and I felt bad doing it. But I know and understand now that it's part of life. Now, of course, the natives, they didn't have guns, so I'm going to do some research on what's the best way of... The elk, usually when you find one, they're usually not too far away, and they'll stand there and look at you, and, you know, maybe a bow or something, I don't know. I'm not sure I want to even get involved with guns and the system we live in, you know, and background checks and having them track you and control you and tell you what to do. So I think I might just come up with some other way to hunt. And I probably won't be doing much of it right now because I can still buy my meat, but here pretty soon when things collapse, and I think they will pretty soon, we're going to have a way to eat, you know. And it's not going to just be me. I'm sure that when these times come, the saints will probably reach out to one another. That's what we need to do. Which reminds me, last video I seen of Derek Bros, you know, I'm warning you guys about Derek because I see something very, very dark there. And I admit I haven't watched many of his videos, but I have seen a couple of them. And sure, everybody makes mistakes, and maybe I misunderstood him. And if he wants to come, and maybe somebody tells him about this video or the other videos I've been doing, I know he knows. He's watched the other videos, and we've talked since then. And he's pretty upset with me, I think. He made that clear. And he doesn't agree that he thinks I'm, you know, not being, that I should just, you know, agree to disagree and let him do his thing and not tell everybody that he's doing wrong or whatever. But no, I wouldn't do it if it was just disagreements on what to eat or what, you know, that's not what we're supposed to do. The problem with Derek right now is he's trying to start a movement. He wants everybody to go out to the four corners. And we all know what happened the first time that people went out there. He was trying to get me to go out there. I didn't know what was going on at the time. But if you watch one of the videos he did recently, and this is not just something he just happened to say that I misinterpret, because I've seen another video of the same kind of thing. It's kind of a theme with him. He's talking about the real people that's going to save us are not going to be Christians. They might be Satanists. I don't know if he uses the word, but he says people from hell with tattoos. Hey, there are Christians that have been through the gutter and have tattoos. There's, you know, I mean, it's not the best thing in the world. It's not my opinion. There are, you know, Old Testament laws against that kind of thing. We're not under any law, and I'm not against people who have a tattoo. I know people that are dear to me that have tattoos. I'm not against it. I personally don't have one, but that's not the issue. You know, I mean, I'm against murder too, but I probably would forgive somebody if they were repentant, you see, for things like that. But I do believe we should try to live the best we can. We're not always going to disagree. Sometimes we're going to have things that we don't know or understand, and we're going to disagree on some things. But if we're teaching Antichrist teachings, or teachings that are the doctrines of devils, such things like, you know, even what I was teaching, forbidding to eat meat. Now, I didn't forbid to eat meat, and I never did say. In fact, you know, to my credit, if you want to credit me on anything, I said I was a vegetarian, and I thought it was the best way. Because for years I thought that. I was deceived by that whole thing. But I never told anyone that if they weren't a vegetarian, that they couldn't have salvation. Because I was well aware that the Bible says that, where Paul says not to turn anyone away or have, or get involved in debates and disputations on what to eat and what not to eat. The kingdom of the Lord is not eating and drinking. I've known that. It says no matter who you are, whether you keep the day or don't keep the day, some people keep the Sabbath, and that's fine. If you want to do that, I don't think there's anything wrong with keeping the Sabbath. I know that it's not something I need to do to have salvation. If you think it's something you like to do and you feel closer to the Lord to doing it, the Apostle Paul says, let everybody be persuaded in his own mind. So I don't think I was ever saying to anyone that you have to be a vegetarian to have salvation. And I think you can go back and watch my videos, and I've never said that. I just said that I thought it might be better if we're going to try and eat, be living a godly life. Maybe we shouldn't kill any animals. And I tried doing that for 15 years. But anyway, so I'm just saying there are differences. There are some things that people say or do or teach or something. That's why the Bible in the New Testament says that we shouldn't have a lot of teachers, because you got to be in a position, if you're a teacher, where you're an elder or somebody who's lived long enough to have some wisdom. And you got to be, we're supposed to find people that have that wisdom, that we can tell that in our community they're the wise chief or the elders and stuff like this. It's not an appointed office. It's just that we point, even with the natives, it wasn't like, oh, we're going to appoint Barry, running water to the position of king. It was nothing like that. He was the father, the elder, and the elder women, and the younger women and the younger men respected and followed their lead. And that's kind of how we're supposed to do. But anyway, Derek's talking about these people from hell that are going to lead us. Listen, I need some clarification, Derek. But if you think you're going to lead a bunch of people out there to the four corners, and it's going to be a bunch of hell's angels, I don't know what you're saying. But I'm not going to try and quote it. You can go back and watch the video. It sounded to me like he's saying that this system's going to collapse. And those who have gone through hell, that's fine. Yes, we did go through hell. I understand what you're saying there. But it's going to be people from, he said, not angels that will help us, but hell's angels. Something to that effect. And if he means, because I've seen another video where he talked about that good, like Jesus went in and overturned the tables, and therefore we're going to overturn this government. Now, how does he think we're going to overturn? And in other words, the kingdom is going to come by violence, according to him. That this group, his group, are going to, out there in the desert, they're going to take it into their own hands and overthrow the government. That's what it sounds like he's saying. And that is unscriptural. We are not going to do that. When Jesus returns, he's going to dispel the darkness with the brightness of his coming, which means with truth. The truth will get rid of the error. We will teach the people the truth. We'll bring fire down from heaven, but it will be a spiritual fire. The bad people, the ones that are mistaken and ignorant, are the ones that's going to be bringing real fire down from heaven. This is what you see there with the disciples saying, hey, Lord, shall we bring fire down and destroy these people? They're blasphemers. And Jesus said, you don't know what kind of spirit you're of. You're not like them. We're not going to give an eye for an eye. We're going to teach and give them love and, bring about the kingdom by forgiveness and love and understanding. So what Derek is saying and believing, I believe. If I'm wrong, I would welcome Derek to text me or explain or somehow or another get this information to me to let me know that I'm mistaken. And if that's the case, and I am mistaken, I will cease exposing the stuff that he's doing, and we'll be brothers. But on the other hand, if he's going to teach this particular idea that we're going to overthrow the government, that scares me. That's why I say I wonder what he what the reason was for him talking about going to Washington where there's no police. See, I think that has something to do with his plans. Anyway, looks like we're coming up to 55 minutes. And yeah, I was just looking at that. I didn't notice that. But there's a pretty good little hole right there. So that's definitely full of water at some point here in the season. So I may dig me a well. I might be able to dig a well there. Because if water sits here, it may drain down in there, and under the ground there may be some water. So we might find water there. I'll try digging a well at some point, probably. I feel like I'm going to find water on this property, though. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and just shut this down. I'll have to go up on the hills, load it, get me a cup of coffee, and go up on top of the hill where I get 5 bars and load it up, and we'll see you guys tomorrow. May the Lord bless you and keep you. Have a good one.